Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here today for this presentation from IWFM. I suppose one of the benefits of webinars is I don't have to inform you where the emergency exits are or where the mobile phone, or to switch on your mobile phones afterwards. But one of the things I'd like just to bring your attention to is that we do have a chat box function here on this platform, and we'd certainly welcome your your points, your observations, and certainly your questions also. Just to introduce ourselves. My name is Conor Cooney. I'm with Arup. I joined in 1999, and excuse me, I'm running the FM team since 2003. We're extending this across Europe and beyond, and we can deliver under 5 pillars, which is responsible business, resilience, performance enhancement, investment planning, and digital integration. I'm the current chair of IWFM committee in Ireland and a co-chair for the Institute of Asset Management of the Munster branch, and also in addition to supporting the NSAI technical committee for facility management on the mirror committee there. Today we have, very fortunately, all the way from Melbourne is Duncan Waddell, and Duncan was on board immediately once we asked, so I'm very grateful to Duncan for that. Duncan is chairman of the ISO Technical Committee 267 for facility management. And the ISO committee is charged with the responsibility of developing ISO standards specifically for facility management. He was also involved in the establishment of FMA Australia in 1987 and once served as chair and has been awarded life membership of the organization. He's also the immediate past chair of Global FM, an international federation of FM associations from around the globe. Duncan is the past chair of Corporate Real Estate Committee of the Property Council of Australia and a fellow of the Australian Institute of Company Directors. Undoubtedly, he's very passionate about exploring and identifying, learning and developing new opportunities to strengthen professional development for all people within their chosen professional life, and for those with emerging careers, to those who are seeking to reset and continue to learn, as well as adapt and adopt as the business world changes for all. I'd also like to say special thanks to the IWFM Ireland committee. We have a very strong committee in the background that are helping to provide these webinars. And just to make people aware, we've got very robust plans in place to further develop the network in Ireland and creating new kind of teaching and learning paths and opportunities for further business among all. Today's discussion, I suppose, in simple terms, the purpose of FM can be simplified as creating an environment where people are safe, comfortable, and productive. I mean, for facility managers, that generally tends to be looking at improving reputational management, including sustainability, deriving the maximum value from operational expenditure, mitigating risk of people and property, and ensuring operational excellence. Now, we are all well aware that the reality is far more complex than that. And while place, people, and technology are generally well understood, we've certainly seen a gap where the integrated process may be somewhat lacking. And I suppose this is where the ISO standards actually come in. So certainly from my own experience, I've seen that many organizations do have systems and processes, but it's the integration of those between one another is where further improvements and enhancements could be made. So ISO 41000 in particular can solve many of these problems. However, what we have noticed that the take-up has been quite slow, and hopefully you can provide some of your thoughts in the chat box here today in due course. Certainly from our own organization has noticed in recent times that the C-suite has taken a much greater interest in the benefits of workplace, particularly around recruitment and retention of talent. So potential areas for improvement could be around the line of sight and better understanding how ISO 41000 not just benefits the FM function within the organization, but the entire operations team. So that could include finance, health and safety, environmental, HR, and so on. So today, we just like to kind of provide two messages succinctly. So Duncan will provide an overview of the FM standards, the whole suite across 41000, but also specifically the benefits of 41001 and how to become more involved in the utilization of that. The second message then is how you as attendees here today can become more involved in the development and review of existing and new standards. And from here, I'd like to kind of present it over to Duncan. So Duncan, you happy there?
Thanks, Connor. Really appreciate it, and I'm delighted to be able to be with you today. So what I'd like to do is, Connor, if you give me the screen, there we go.
Yep.
Thank you very much indeed. Let me pick this up myself, and here we go. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome along to today. I'm delighted to be able to have the opportunity of speaking with you, and fortunately, I actually have attended a standards meeting in Dublin not so long ago, although COVID intervened in the year of the meeting there and now. And it was great to be able to be hosted by the Ireland team as far as standards is concerned, but also meet so many passionate people involved in facility management in your part of the world and from other parts of the world as well. So the title that Connor threw me is The Then, the Now, and How We Get There. And it's a big ask. I mean, Connor's introduction was pretty thorough, and it just goes to show the complexity of what we're involved in. And my issue is that with that complexity, when was the last time that you went to a barbecue or a catch up for a drink or a beer or whatever the case may be, or even a cup of coffee, and someone says to you, and what do you do? I'm involved in facilities management, and you get this look that goes across the face, and you go, really? Let me explain about what we do. And you explain this thing called FM, and most people go, goodness gracious, I didn't know there was all this stuff was looked after in one spot. And it's amazing to try and get an understanding about what FM is all about. Now, the reason that Standards, International Standards Organization took on the challenge of developing the 41,000 series, and more importantly, 41,001, is that it was seen there was a real demand for a management system standard. There needed to be something as a framework within which we operate, because any profession in the world has a framework they operate within. Doctors, lawyers, solicitors, surveyors, engineers, and so on and so forth. All these professional bodies have a framework that can be measured against. It's not telling you how to do the job, it's setting a framework within place as to how to move forward. And what I want to do is touch on how ISO TC 267 has moved forward in developing these standards. Now, there's a guy who obviously was a lot smarter than I was back in the early part of the 1900s, who worked for the Toyota production system. And one of the things that he said in his quotes is progress cannot be generated when we are satisfied with existing situations. And one of the things that I've noticed, and I think Connor alluded to it in his introduction, was maybe the take up in mature countries, that is mature economies, hasn't been as quick on the ISO 41001 standard. And maybe that's because we've all become a bit complacent that we know how to do it. And it's all been done before, and we've got nothing to learn. But my attitude is, and funny enough, Taiichi Ono made the comment, without standards, there can be no improvement. So we are all seeking innovation, we're seeking improvement, we're seeking constant development of doing things differently. And if we don't, we'll crawl up into a corner and we'll be passed by the rest of the world. We need to be able to improve. To have a framework to operate within and as a guidance tool is so, so important. So to me, standards are paramount in what we're trying to achieve. Now, I don't think I need to go through the basic details this midday for you guys, this evening for me, as to what FM is all about. But I often point out to people when I'm talking about the subject of FM, and they say to me, well, what's the difference between this particular area of work and what facility management does? And the first point of difference, the major point of difference, is that we are in the people business. We are about integrating people, place, and process within the built environment. And the whole idea is that we end up improving our quality of life and the productivity of the businesses and the organizations that we serve. And it's not just about business, because FM is involved in every part of our lives, whether it's for work, whether it's for pleasure, whether it's for infrastructure support. FM plays an integral role in every piece of fabric that we're involved in our lives. And it's important that we recognise, firstly, the important role that we play and be proud of what we do. But then secondly, well, how should we structure this and how potentially can we do it better? And what we need to also think about is the demand organisation. And the demand organisation is basically referred to as the organisation that has a need, that has an opportunity for us to use the built form to provide a quality outcome by integrating people and space and place. So the important thing is that we are the facilitators, and it's not meant to be a play on word, the facilitators for the outcome between what the demand organisation is seeking to achieve, what people need to live in and what they need to operate within to deliver the needs of that demand organisation, but also to do so in a sustainable manner and to do so in the context of continual improvement. Now, let me just talk a little bit to start with about ISO TC 267. So let's deal with the acronyms. I hate acronyms. ISO is the International Organisation for Standardisation. And TC means Technical Committee. So we are Technical Committee number 267, which is dedicated to the work focused on facility management. And right now, we have 52 countries involved in TC 267. And I did some research last night that there are something like 195 or 96 recognised countries around the world, according to the definitions based on the UN and also by ISO themselves. And we have O members who are observing members, that is, members who want to know what we're doing, but don't necessarily actively have a vote, but they can contribute. And then we have P members, and you can see the breadth of the number of countries involved in their engagement around the world. And the interesting thing is that what we look to do is engage with these countries either on a face-to-face basis or a virtual basis. The last year and a half has been virtually, as you can imagine. But prior to that, and again, I mentioned before one of our meetings in Dublin, but we have had other meetings around the world, including in Melbourne, Australia, as you can see down there on the underside of the map there, right the way across through into Europe, North America, South America, and in Asia, in Malaysia. So it's been quite extensive, and the engagement from the International Committee is significant. We have something in the order of 366 people who play a role across the structure that we actually support and represent. Now, I know death by words on PowerPoint is not appropriate, but I wanted to leave you with something that you could take away and read afterwards and understand a bit about what we are trying to achieve and what we are seeking to deliver as an outcome and an output for the constituents of the ISO world. So here I've quite clearly outlined what the objectives are of ISO TC 267 and what our priorities are as far as the delivery of our work is concerned. And I'm going to get on to some of that work right now, because I think it's important that the world understands the various focus elements that we are looking at the moment, but the focus elements that we'd like to look at more of. And that's going to involve having more experts participate with us, but it's also going to mean more people committing to the work and the output of what the TC is delivering. So the way that we're structured as an organisation is that we have our TC committee, and right now we have 5 published standards, which will probably be 6 by the end of this year. And we have 6 standards under development and 1 existing standard, which is under revision at this point in time. And I mentioned before that we have the 37 participating national standard bodies and the 15 observing members as well. And this is the way we as a TC are structured. And I will explain this just in a little more detail in a moment, but we have 3 advisory groups. So we have a chairman's advisory group. We have an AG1, which is a framework group, which provides some forward thinking and direction. We have a communications group in AG2, and then a number of working groups determined by the W. And at this point, we're up to 8 working groups, and some of those working groups have a number of working projects. And you can see underneath of those working groups the various standards that are either being worked on or that have currently been delivered within the marketplace since 2017. So I might just talk to the working groups and the active activities that they're involved in. So working group 1 is known as our concepts and context group. And we have a FM vocabulary standard that was first published in 2017. And we have a document called, which is called a TR, which is called a technical report on FM scope, key concepts and benefits. If any of you are involved in bringing new employees into the facility management world and have joined your efforts in what you're doing in your part of the world, whatever, whether you're a demand organisation, whether you're a supplier to the marketplace, you need people to understand what ISO TR 41013 is on about. It's a document that's very succinct, but it's a briefing document as to what FM is all about. If you have this document, it's a key briefing document for anyone involved in FM. WG2 look after what we notionally call our operational area. And the first document that was produced from that team, and that particular group, WG2, is in abeyance at the moment, but was an FM guidance on strategic sourcing and the development of agreements. This document basically sets out the way in which you can put together a strategic sourcing framework, either as a demand organisation or as a supplier to the field of FM, but also how agreements could be structured. And predominantly it's focused on performance management and performance agreements. It's a vital tool, and I think provides a very good grounding for anyone engaged in delivering or receiving of FM services. WG3 was responsible for the huge task of developing our management system standard, which was finally published in 2018. And this is the basic framework under which facility management should operate, running all the way through from its purpose and its context, through to how to structure it and what are the things that need to be done, through to the continuous improvement and continuous engagement in reviewing how it's going. It's an easy read, it's not complex, and I assure you it's a framework that is well and truly been agreed to around the world as best practice. I don't like the term best practice, but if I was to say there is one, that is 41001. It's a document to be read, consumed, and practiced. And for anyone, again, who is coming into the field, you might choose to read this on the basis of where could I go from where I am now, through to being a demand organisation saying, what should I set as my expectations from the marketplace? And how should I structure it? So it's a great tool for both the supply and the demand side of our marketplace. WG4 is our strategy and policy team, who have published last year the development of FM strategy. Great document. Most people don't know, well, how do I put together an FM strategy? And then once you've done that, you need to have an FM policy, which is exactly what this particular working group has been working on in the past 18 months, 2 years. So what's under development at the moment? Well, we're back to reviewing the vocabulary already. So if you've read the vocabulary document and you believe that it needs some tweaking and that it needs to have more terminology added to it, for example, digitization, technology, and other elements that are growing rapidly within our field, this is a space and place where you can have a voice through your national standards body in making a contribution as to what the vocab of FM should be moving to the future. And also, this particular working group is looking at the role of FM in sustainability and resilience. And this very much picks up on the comments that Connor made before with regards to the Sustainable Development Goals as outlined by the United Nations. And I'm going to come to that topic in a moment. So I'd ask you to hold off any questions just yet until I explain what TC267 is responding to. WG4 has been working on the development of FM policy. These are the strategy and policy are two key fundamentals that any FM organisation needs to either have in place as a demand organisation, or if you're in the supply side of the business, how do I respond and how do I help people meet the requirements that they may have? Excuse me. WG5 is about human experience. And the first standard that they have taken on is influencing organisational behaviours for improved facility outcomes. This has been a massive piece of work, which is moving to its final part of being reviewed as a CD, what we call a CDR. And basically it is a draft review. But human experience within the FM marketplace is massive. How many of you are moving back into the workplace after so many months and months of being out of the workplace physically and then moving back into the physical workplace? What are the differences going to mean and how are companies responding to it? This is a sort of document that we're putting in place to assist facility managers know how to respond. WG6 is about technology and FM. Oh my goodness, what a challenge we've got here. So the first thing that we've done is we've looked to put together a document that's based around the scope, the key concepts and the benefits of technology in FM. And what will spin out from that is a number of standards in the way in which facility management needs to be approached as far as the digital world is concerned. And I'm talking about BIM, I'm talking about digital twins, I'm talking about AI, AR, a whole bunch of the tech terms that we're all across. But what we're looking to do is embrace those, because this is the way of sustainability and the future of what FM is moving towards. Emergency management is WG7, which is about guidance on emergency preparedness and management of an epidemic. Driven out of COVID-19, yes, but there are far more epidemics that we need to manage productively within the marketplace. Flu, outbreaks within the workforce, within different countries around the world. We haven't called it about pandemic. It's been known as epidemic, because we realise that our pandemic is hopefully an isolated thing that we will deal with, unfortunately, for several years. But epidemics are things that countries are grappling with around the world on a regular basis. So what we've done is sought to put something in place about emergency management, but in this particular standard, it will focus on an epidemic. And WG8 is just commencing. And this is a massive piece of work as well. This is about performance measurement and improvement. And it's starting to talk about all the things, performance, how we shift from this do and pay, old-fashioned style, I would call it, respond and react type of work, albeit that sometimes it's important, to being thinking forward about how am I going to measure, knowing and understanding how do I deliver value in the future as far as the services that I'm requiring and the services that I can deliver. So WG8 is about to start. We've put out a call for experts. There, in all these fields, by the way, for those who are interested, there is a call for experts out on each of these groups. You only have to approach your national standards body to be involved and engaged with any one of these particular areas, and some other areas that I will touch on shortly. So how do we structure this? How do we, you saw that we've got various working groups and we've got various standards sitting in various places. So on the left-hand side of the screen in front of you, what we've done is we've structured 41001 as being our base element. So 41001 is our management system standard. It's what we believe the structure of FM and international best practice has dictated best practice should follow. So we move from concepts and context through leadership and strategy, planning and support, the heart of what most FM is on about, which is operations, and then finally performance improvement and innovation. Those are probably, in summary format, the 5 key areas of any FM delivery and output. And that's what we've focused our efforts around. But then if you think about the focus areas of what we do, we start to talk about the overarching things about vocabulary and why are we doing this and why is it important, which is the 3 items mentioned in the top left-hand square. Then we've got business and finance, resiliency and business continuity, human factors, quality and technology. Now you can see some gaps there, but I can suggest to you that there are going to be some other things that they're going to fill that gap. And I'll come to that again a bit later on. But what I want to do is stimulate you to think about, well, what's important to you and what would you like to see your national standards body focus on, and how can we support you at the international level in driving a strategic response to your needs? So this is paramount in how we support through ISO 41001. Now I mentioned, and Connor certainly mentioned in his introduction, the UN SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And on this page, I have listed all 17 of the UN SDGs. I'm sorry to speak in acronyms, but I did explain what it meant. So these are the 17 that we're involved in. And what standards, what ISO has started to do is measure how our technical committees respond to those SDGs. And I am pleased to say that TC 267 contributes 10 ISO standards towards the following 14 sustainable development goals. So if you take the mix and the match of the standards either under development or that have been published, 10 at this point in time, against the 17 UN SDGs, we are contributing to 14. Now, I have never heard, in the last 12 months, I have never heard so much chat globally about support to SDGs. And I'm proud to say, as the chair of TC 267, that we've taken this very, very strategically, and we've ensured that we respond appropriately in meeting the goals of organisations that adopt 41001 and its other standards to be embraced, and then to obviously contribute towards their contribution as an organisation to meeting UN SDGs. And I think that's pretty important. And I'm very proud of what we've been able to achieve. I might also point out that we as a technical committee, we don't just operate in our own right. We actually have what we call liaisons with other parties. And I just, again, I know there's a lot of words here, but you can have a look at these in your own time. But we're dealing with buildings and civil engineering works. We have people involved in air quality, in asset management through TC 251, security and resilience, healthcare organisation management. And then we have liaisons too, that is from us to other parties, with quality management and quality assurance, with occupational health and safety, again, with digitisation of information. So these are the parties that we're actively involved with. So not only are we involved in developing standards and technical reports and technical standards, we're also reaching out and making sure that we're working with and in partnership all these other groups, because we're not an island in our own right. We know as facility managers, we must be engaged in work with other people to be successful in what we do. We also work with other organisations in liaison. So we work with the ETUC, we work with EuroFM, and we also work with Global FM. So there's some of the bodies that we're engaged with, and there are more that are reaching out, and we in turn are reaching out to others to make sure that these topics are not just being dealt with in isolation. We're not trying to build a vertical silo. What we are trying to do is build something that picks up on the world of FM. And that's why over my shoulder, you will see a digital representation of the world. It's not just about country to country. It's making sure we engage with other people with similar aspirations to deal with each of these areas of technical competence as well. And I think that's very heartening from the point of view of the way in which we can be engaged in the future and recognised for our professional practice of FM. And I think you all should stand proud that there is a group called TC267, who is ensuring that your professional recognition is noticed in the world, and is delivering some real values. So what I wanted to talk about now is a few of the ways in which you can quantify some of this stuff. And it's difficult. I mean, we're talking about management system standards. And I will say that one of the parties around the world that has spent some time on doing some recognition of the value of a management system standard was the British Standards Institute. And they actually took some time and effort to actually have a look about, well, how do we measure the benefits of a management system standard? And they chose 9001 as an example. And I just wanted to use this as a comparator. Now, I know you might suggest that I'm drawing a long bow. I get that. However, I believe we'll see this come home to roost. From a management perspective, it has been shown that people who have adopted ISO 9001 have outperformed, that is certified companies, have outperformed the marketplace that they're in by over 100%. That from a financial point of view, 55% of companies who were certified achieved cost savings. From an operational point of view, they boosted their performance. They're out, and boosting their performance isn't about saving money. Boosting their performance is about output and outcome in meeting objectives of the demand organization. Client satisfaction. They improved client service and loyalty. Nothing better than the customer you've got today, because they'll be back tomorrow. It's a customer in the hand. And from a sales and marketing point of view, 71% gained and acquired new customers and retained existing clients. Now, if I was to even apply half of those numbers by adopting a management system standard recognized at an ISO level to facility management, I don't think I'd find any one of you sitting around this room who wouldn't want a piece of that. And I think that's pretty powerful. And that's work, as I said, it's only been done. I cannot find any other research on any other management system standard, but BSI undertook this a couple of years ago, and I can quote those figures from the research work that they have published. Now, I'd like to think that from a ISO TC267 point of view, that 41001 will provide the same outcome and the same outputs in the years to come when we can actually measure it. So you sit there and you say, well, why would I want to get involved in this thing called standards? Well, the way we're structured, for a start, gives an opportunity for you to be involved with the global world of FM. It means you're participating at an international level in developing that best practice that I mentioned before. So obviously the National Standards Authority of Ireland, where we were hosted for our function, they have a mirror committee associated with facility management, and they directly contribute into TC267. So why would an expert, that is all of you sitting in on this call today, why would you want to be involved? Well, basically you're collaborating with experts from around the world. The opportunity is there for you, and from within your own country. You're liaising with international experts on a technical and a professional basis. You have the ability to influence standards to ensure local applicability. So quite often I hear the statement, oh, well, you know, we don't look at international standards because they don't apply to us. We do it differently. My attitude is, well, hang on, if everyone has a voice, there's no reason why we can't consider everyone's position. So for example, let me give you an example. One of the reasons that we have used the word demand organization is that a number of you sitting around our table today might think of us, well, that's the client organization, or I'm the client. But if you go to different languages and different cultures around the world, being a client is totally different to being a demand organization. So what we do is we flatten the language so that everybody understands what a demand organization is, because in some countries, client doesn't work. Let me give you another example. Another example is we don't refer to senior management all right? We refer to a different hierarchy. We talk to top management, because if you go to somewhere like Japan, senior management means the old boys upstairs. Top management means the people that are actually involved in running the organization. So senior management is dealt with a different term of respect as far as different languages are concerned. So we adopt and adapt. Now, that's just on vocabulary. Can you imagine the terminology where, for example, if you go to a couple of northern Scandinavian countries, they only have 2/3 of the words that we use in English. So we're talking about developing standards that can be understood and implemented around the world, but using a common language. So it truly is adaptation and adoption of best practice, recognized by the world. And then finally, it demonstrates technical and professional leadership. This is not a contracting game. This is about delivering an outcome by preempting and understanding the needs of the demand organization and responding appropriately. So one of the things that I find, and Isaac Newton made this quote, we build too many walls and not enough bridges. And I think that we have become the mature organizations around the world, and the mature countries in the facilities management world have become complacent, where we say, this is the way we do it, and this is the only way we do it. And what we do is we build these vertical silos of practice, rather than thinking about what can we learn from what other people are doing around the world. So we need to build bridges. And if we don't adopt and think about what other bridges are out there and what are the other practices to be considered, we're going to go adrift. Now, there's a whole bunch of ways that you around the table can get involved in facility management, ISO TC 267, 41001. You might choose to self-certify. You don't have to engage a certification company to practice to 41001. 41001 was developed to keep it simple. I love KISS. Keep it simple. You can self-certify to 41001. You don't need to get a third-party company to certify you. And I've put up here on the screen one organization that will allow you to demonstrate your self-certification, and they will issue, for a very low subscription fee, they will issue you with a certificate of self-certification. So you can prove to your clients, you can prove to your top management, you can prove to your demand organization that you are practicing to ISO 41001, that you have embraced best practice. Really, really important. So that's one way you can get involved in it. Another way is by thinking about how you can play a role through your national standards body. So this is a very complex area. When Connor first started in speaking, he talked about a number of areas to do with sustainability. We talked about output and outcome. We talked about resilience. We talk about financial performance, looking after our responsibilities as employees and employers. What's our duty of care? All these are things that we need to consider. ISO 41001 offers you the opportunity to embrace that. So get involved, and get involved with your national standards body. Get involved with the standards body of Ireland, the authority within Ireland. We need at TC 267, we don't operate without Ireland's involvement. If we need your input and we need your contribution, either directly or indirectly. Very, very important. I've listed a couple of things here as a couple of reference points for you to go and have a look at when you're doing your homework at a later time, no doubt, that you could actually go and have a look at. And finally, I hope, Connor, I've kept to time, and I would be delighted to discuss any questions or opportunities. I will say I failed to mention one thing. You asked me before, and I failed to mention it during my follow-up. The things that are coming to fruition about what are we working on in the future, let me throw some seeds out there. Maintenance management, supply chain, performance management in a whole range of different areas, digitization in a whole range of different areas. So there's 3 or 4 that come to mind. So what are the things that challenge you in Ireland or in your area of practice? And how can TC267 help you achieve those outcomes? So thanks, Connor. I'll give you back the screen and you can pick it up from there.
Great. Thanks so much, Duncan. That was, really insightful. And look, hopefully everybody kind of got some value out of that. Certainly, there's a few takeaways there for me. And look, most importantly, I suppose here today is that people are aware that these tools, and they are tools, the tools are there available for you to use. And what I particularly liked, Duncan, was demonstrating technical and professional competency. I mean, ultimately, that's what it's about here today, that, for each organization, in order to kind of build that credibility, you have an ISO standard behind you, it's internationally agreed, and that by implementing such standards, you increase that reputation and credibility within your own organization and externally also. So there were a few questions I might put towards you there, Duncan, if I can, please. Do you think we as an industry build good business cases for investment and the implementation of the ISO? I mean, certainly my own experience is that, trying to demonstrate this to a higher level, certainly internally within the organization, has been an obstacle in the past. What's your kind of opinion on that?
My view is absolutely. For example, I've done some work here in Australia that specifically has talked to the aged care area and also to the community housing area. And one of the things that I was able to demonstrate to them about how they were spending money inappropriately was by putting together, helping them to the board to get further funding by a business case that actually showed them a cost per apartment or a cost per bed as far as the delivery of FM services. It removes the emotion. Now, you need to have emotion involved in those sorts of decisions. But what you need to do is look at things from a business perspective. So if you're going to a board of directors, they think differently to the average Joe. They don't think the same as someone who's providing the day-to-day services. They're thinking from a strategic, what do I need to invest? Where am I going to get the money from? How do I free up the resources? Where else can I save funds so I can make the investment in other areas? So the short answer is, yes, I think the facility management industry and profession sells itself short by not thinking about the business of FM. So I've always said, Connor, and I think you've probably heard me say this before, we are not in the facilities management business. None of you are in the facilities management business. You are in the business of managing facilities. So for goodness sake, step up and start managing.
It's really good, actually, because, I've heard this numerous times over the years about, we don't speak the same language. And I suppose what I mean by that is that how the FM industry, speaks in the same language to the COOs, the CFOs, CEOs, in understanding what the business needs are, and then translating that. Certainly on a recent project there for ourselves, where we had, there's a particularly large life cycle sheet with 300,000 cells of information, and all the client wanted to know was, what's the service charge at the end of the day? Sure. It was one metric, and sure. I've heard of in the past where, even from an engineering perspective, working for a dairy client, how we need to translate the impact into price per litre of milk. So I think there's some good examples there. So really understanding what their language is in terms of what does that improve the business overall and the context of that. Do you believe that the industry is being more regularly perceived of creating value within an organization and can have a significant impact on the organizational success?
I think there are organizations that do that well and some don't. The first thing we need to do is understand what is required. So what is the demand organization asking? And I spend a lot of my professional life helping organizations define what they're looking for from their facility management input, because they don't know. It's a bit like, go and do this job and I'm not going to give you any money to do it, so to speak. Whereas I turn around and say, so what are the core drivers for example, you take a bank or you take a major commercial office space user. What are the core drivers? Why do you need all this space? What are the functions that are taking place? Do you work in teams? Even more importantly now, what are the workplaces we're creating of today to enable our people to deliver an outcome and an output in a safe and productive manner? So I think the first thing we need to do is that the facility manager needs to ask more questions. I think the facility manager needs to say, what are your expectations? And then I can look at delivering an outcome and an output that will meet those expectations. But so often we spend our time running around fighting spot fires, not thinking about the strategic concept. Now, 41001 is very clear on this. It is the first principle of implementing a strategic framework. You must know what the demand organisation's requirements are. The problem is most demand organisations don't know what they want because they haven't been able to define it or to interpret it into terms that relate to their facilities. So finding out the nub of what is required is the key. That is the key.
And that's actually one of the first subjects, I suppose, or one of the first sections within 41,000 is context of the organization.
Correct.
What is the business trying to achieve, and how does asset management help it achieve that effectively?
Correct.
So in this case, in fact, the facilities management function can help prompt that, so, rather than being kind of reactive and waiting, being told what to do, they can be more proactive, and define, okay, we think this is what you need, and help, start to kind of an iterative process then, from that. I do recall Steve Jobs once saying that, he was asked about the marketing for the iPhone. And he says, how can you ask people what they think about it when they've never seen anything remotely like it in the past?
Sure.
So in effect, I do think it's incumbent on us as an industry to be more provocative in that case, or more, more proactive, certainly, looking at, okay, maybe we can bring it to the board and say, this is what we think you could need or should need, and let them maybe come back on that then, rather than waiting for them to tell us.
Quite often that is the case, Connor, because you're dealing with an audience that doesn't know what to expect because it's not their core business. Their core business is finance or human resources or whatever the case may be. So what we need to be saying is, what is the output and the outcome that you're expecting as a demand organisation? And then how can the FM organisation support the workforce to deliver that outcome? So that's really, really important. But it's a matter of knowing the right questions to ask. And what 41001 does is it enables people to actually turn around and say, hey, these are the questions you should be asking. This is what you need to be looking for. So it doesn't provide the solutions, it provides a framework, and it suggests quite proactively what are the questions you need to ask to move on and move forward in.
Yeah, so it's a prompt or tool in effect, which is kind of exactly what we need.
Correct.
Okay. From your own experience, what percentage of organizations do you estimate would have a strong FM framework in place, something either ISO 41001 or similar?
I'd like it to be a lot more. I think I'm going to work on 80-20. I reckon 20% of organisations have a reasonable understanding of it. And I think those organisations aren't necessarily the big ones. I think they can be smaller in size and style. But I would like to think that 80-20 rule in the next 5 years will shift, and we'll see a shift back to 70% of organisations saying, if we don't get on board with this, we're going to get missed in the whole process. And that's especially going to come about when it comes to performance management and measurement. And it's also going to come back to the coupling of the digital world and how that can assist us. It's not going to drive the outcome, but how FM needs to engage with the digital world in a proactive manner. That brings on a whole other story, because to go and get the funds to engage in the FM world is a pretty tricky one, because generally FM is not given the license or the pounds to go out and achieve that. But again, this comes back to business case. Here's my business case. I can deliver a better outcome if I can deliver these inputs to achieve what the demand organisation is looking for. ISO 41001 sets all of this out very, very clearly. It's a simple read, and I can assure you a lot of prompters, because I think most people would pick it up and say, yeah, I know all about this stuff. That's that complacency issue. I know all about this. I've been doing it for 20 years. Well, I'm sorry. I don't think everybody knows what it's all about. The world has changed. Performance management is different. The way you engage with your workforce is different. The challenges into the supply chain is different. We need to respond appropriately. And it's up to us to take that lead role. And let me tell you, if we don't adopt and embrace 41001 and its process framework, my view is FM is going to become redundant in the space of 5 to 10 years. I'll say it as bluntly as that. I think the challenge for FM is to fess up, understand that a framework is required to be recognised as a profession, and then in turn embrace it and move forward. And I think we can do it. And I think FMers are the most resilient of all the areas within finance and production and other areas within an organisation or a corporate structure. So I think we need to rise to the challenge. And just because you've been doing it for 20 or 10 years, move away from that. What can I do differently? And let me take on some new ideas. Sorry, Connor.
No, look, that's spot on. I mean, from my own experience, that's, what I've seen is there are frameworks in place, but they're not necessarily integrated. So you might have objectives, but not necessarily the criteria that check those, the performance of those objectives afterwards. So that's just one area. Well, another interesting one actually is, for service providers. So can you explain how service providers can add more value by becoming more integrated or even implementing ISO 41001?
Wow.
I suppose the one issue here is, is asset owner. The service provider isn't necessarily not always the asset owner, and therefore, whose role is it to actually develop and implement this framework?
Good point. Here in Australia, as an example, and I think in the UK, through the health and schooling area, there's been a massive drive to deliver better outcomes from an asset management point of view, and more importantly, people involved in the built form. Leave the asset management infrastructure side of things alone. Let's talk about people engaged. So it's about productivity and it's about output to meet the demand organisation's requirements. I think that what needs to happen is that organisations have got to understand that a resilient framework that meets societal expectations as much as the technology requirements is really important. And FM again brings back those two things side by side. So there's societal expectations, sustainability expectations, as well as a corporate expectation. Now, if you go to the supply chain side of things, here in Australia, for example, the federal government has in every one of their supply contracts a statement that says you will be compliant with any international standard that comes to fruition during the time of the contract. So it says that any standard, ISO TC 267, 41001, has to be embraced by the supply chain. I've been contacted in the last 2 weeks by a major organisation that turns over $5 billion Australian, which is 2.5 billion pounds, basically. They've come to me and said, well, how do we go about adopting 41001? Because we've got major defence contracts and other contracts coming up in the next 2 years, and we know we have to adopt this as a standard. So they've come and said, well, how can the ISO world help us in putting this in place and a structure in place? So what's going to happen is governments are going to say, we want best in class. We will adopt ISO as being best in class. Therefore, we'll prescribe it. And I think that the supply chain has two opportunities. One, to say we're compliant with best practice globally. Or secondly, go to a client and say, we offer best practice because that's who we are as an organisation. And I think that's a really important point to note. So I think the supply chain side, that is suppliers in the organisation who play a vital role need to pick up and embrace this, as much as when they go out and subcontract themselves, they should also have an expectation that their subcontractors or suppliers will also meet the same framework. So I think it's top down, bottom up. And I think it's pretty important that our valued service providers in the marketplace also seek to adopt those best practices.
Yeah, I'd agree with that sentiment completely. I might take a few questions here from the chat box, actually. So there's one here from Adrian Owen. Where does an organization who has in-house delivery sit as a demand and a supplier with 41001?
So just get the first part of that again, Tom.
So where does an organization who has in-house delivery sit as a demand and a supplier?
Okay,
so
good.
They're actually in both.
Great question. And what I'd be doing is that I'd be saying, if I was responsible at board level or at director level, top management level for that organization, I'd be saying, I would like you to be best in class against our competitors, because it will help us become a better corporate organization. So you would in turn challenge your internal team to meet the standard and to deliver against the framework prescribed through the standard. So my view is, I think it can be embraced by an internal delivery organisation, and there is no reason why people can't embrace it. And I can speak to 3 organisations that I know of. One is the Federal Bank of South Africa as being one who has moved down that path, and there are 2 others a university here in Melbourne, RMIT, who have embraced self-certification for in-house delivery according to 41001. And there's a hospital in Perth in Western Australia. So I can point to 3 direct examples off the top of my head, all in-house delivery models, and they have sought to adopt and be self-certified to 41001.
Very good. Very good. I'm conscious we've only a few minutes left here, so I might fly through these ones.
Okay.
What can we do as FMs to promote the standards among demand organizations as they ultimately will drive the adoption or the need for service providers to adopt? So this is from Andrew Mason.
Hi, Andrew. Nice to have a question from you. I think we can point to some of the benefits that are stated within the BSI research around a management system standard. I think there's some hard evidence there that's demonstrated through that sort of adoption. But I also think it comes back to really questioning the demand organisation as to what their expectations are, and then aligning FM inputs to meet those expectations.
Thanks. Another one from Declan Connor. Does ISO 41000 go hand in hand with ISO 9001 or replace the need for it?
ISO 41001 adopts all the principles of 9001. There is a section on information management, and it's one of the weaknesses within the facility management industry and profession, in my opinion. So we embrace 9001. And in fact, if you practice to 41001, you don't need to necessarily become subscribed to 9001, in my opinion.
Okay. One from Andrew Mason again. 41020 performance management is the key standard for me to drive adoption. That's what clients always devolve to. Stick rather than carrot, but we can do it differently. That's just a statement as such.
And I'd welcome anyone's input, anyone from around the world, input into that working group, become nominated through your national standards body.
One from Vaughan Halliday. Where can an organisation get help in implementing the ISO standard for FM management systems?
Look, we're not about professional or personal endorsement. However, I'm sure if you reached out through Connor, or if you wanted to reach out through to myself, I'd be happy to help you and lead you down that particular path. It depends on where you're at and what sort of industry you are. But I'm sure between Connor and I, we can find you a response. Mm.
Okay, we've 1 minute left. I'm just going to probably close out at this point. First of all, I just want to say thanks to Duncan so much. Really interesting presentation from my perspective. And obviously, thanks very much to IWFM for kind of being hosting this, and of course to all the attendees. We had a very high number for this event, so I really appreciate your attendance. There was a whole range of other questions that I would have liked to get into and a further discussion on it, particularly around the UN SDGs. I see one of the big four is looking to recruit 100,000 staff in 5 years, specifically around the ESGs. So sustainability is going to become big. I like the idea around that we're not looking at it as a non-vertical silo. You know, we're very broad thinking and kind of, and look, ultimately, I suppose that this profession becomes recognized. I mean, we'd like to kind of get to that point also. So look, without further ado, thanks again, Duncan. Really
Pleasure.
appreciate your time, and thanks to everyone else as well for attending today. I hope you enjoyed the event. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for the invitation.